Our members are continuing to seek energy and water efficiency, but increasingly they're thinking about carbon emissions and the health of buildings. They're doing this both because it matches the mission, but also because we're seeing more state localities pushing in this direction, and we want to see policies that work and really meet the intended goals.
Welcome to BuzzHouse, a Baker Tilly podcast where you can find all the buzz around multifamily housing. I'm Don Bernards, the partner in charge of Baker Tilly's multifamily housing practice.
And I'm Garrick Gibson, a partner at Baker Tilly, also specializing in consulting on multifamily housing transactions across the country.
Each week, we'll bring you a guest or a topic in the multifamily housing industry that will help you win now and anticipate tomorrow. Let's get started. In the affordable housing industry, we know it takes collaboration with many stakeholders to accomplish goals. We see a wonderful example of collaboration with our guest today in the BuzzHouse, Andrea Ponsor, the president and CEO for Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future, otherwise known as SAHF. We'll talk with Andrea about a number of key areas SAHF is focusing on. Before getting to our discussion with Andrea, we have just a few updates from around the industry. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition recently released their annual report entitled The Gap: A Shortage of Affordable Homes. The shortage of affordable units for the extremely low-income renters only, unfortunately, continues to grow. According to the report, extremely low-income renters in the U.S. face a shortage of 7.3 million units of affordable and available rental homes, resulting in only 33 affordable and available homes for every 100 extremely low-income renter households. This number of 7.3 million is up from a shortage of just 7 million units in 2022, so over 300,000 new units that were short. We'll have this report link available on our webpage for your review. In other news, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, or FHFA, recently announced that the Housing Trust Fund, or HTF, and Capital Magnet Funds, of course CMF, will receive a combined $545 million for affordable housing initiatives this year. The funds, of course, come from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. According to FHFA, the Housing Trust Funds will receive $354 million, and the CMF program will receive $191 million. This funding comes from Fannie and Freddie's new business purchases, and due to 2022 market conditions, the amounts are significantly lower than last year's totals, which were a total of $740 million compared to this $545 million. These numbers are higher, however, than the 2020 amounts. Finally, the IRS recently issued Notice 2023-2022, which includes the population figures by which the amount of 9% low-income housing tax credits and private activity bond caps are calculated. While total population figures only increased 0.4% from 2022 to 2023, the per capita figure for 9% credits is raising from $2.60 per capita to $2.75. For private activity bonds, the amount was raised from $110 per capita to $120 per capita. Nationwide, this means that there will be 6.2% more 9% credits in 2023, and there will be 9.2% more private activity bonds nationwide. All states will have both a greater amount of 9% credits and private activity bonds year over year. However, with the temporary 12.5% increase in 9% credits gone, the amount of credits for 2023 is still below 2021 totals. Now, we are very excited to jump into our conversation with Andrea, and we're going to turn over to Garrick to get it started.
Thanks, Don. And Andrea, welcome to the show. To begin, Andrea, would you please tell us a little bit about your role as president and CEO of SAHF, along with a little bit about SAHF as an actual organization?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Don and Garrick. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little more about Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future, or SAHF. SAHF is pretty unique. We're a mission-driven policy and practice collaborative comprised of 12 of the country's leading nonprofit providers of affordable homes. And as a collaborative, we believe that a quality home can change lives, especially when policy and programs that govern those homes put people at the center. Each day, our members are working at almost 2,000 properties around the country, operating rental homes that serve about 230,000 people. And I get to work with those 12 exemplary organizations to understand what's happening on the ground and lead our team in applying those on-the-ground insights to shape policies and practices that then help create and preserve more affordable homes that are sustainable and that help connect people to the things they need to thrive.
Andrea, thanks for that intro. So how do you work with the members of SAHF? What is the structure? What is the type of correspondence? How are those priorities actually set?
Yeah, SAFE is member driven. We'll be 20 years old next month. And from the start, our members have convened around a shared understanding that a quality home can be a platform for better outcomes for both people and the communities they live in. Our members also understood from the beginning that they can have the greatest impact by really candidly sharing their challenges and solutions with one another in a way that doesn't always happen among developers who are otherwise competitors. And they use that experience and that influence in leading nonprofits to help advocate for policies and practices that work on the ground, but also create homes that are resident centered. So we're organized around that shared mission and around an understanding of the power of peer exchange. Our board is comprised of the CEOs of our member organizations. They come together to learn from one another about creating affordable homes and about running their businesses, and in turn help inform our priorities. But our peer exchange doesn't stop there. We operate about 10 other regular peer groups from leaders within our member organizations, from developers and asset managers to CFOs and people leading organizational change around racial equity. And these leaders also share their challenges, their innovations, and their insights, and we use those to inform our policy and practice work, from setting the agenda to the very details of comments and suggestions we're providing.
Speaking of priority areas, let's jump into one area. We'd like to learn a little bit more about what you're working on, and that's environmental sustainability. We know, industry-wide, that's a heightened area of interest with the Inflation Reduction Act and so forth. So would you be able to let our listeners know a little bit about what you're working on in that base?
Sure. I'm really excited to share some of what we've been working on. SAFE members have been leading the way in bringing energy and water efficiency to affordable rental homes for over a decade. Our members made this shared commitment to reduce their energy and water consumption 20% by 2020. And they achieved that goal handily, even a little ahead of time, with 29% energy savings and 24% water savings. But they haven't stopped there. Our members are continuing to seek energy and water efficiency, but increasingly they're thinking about carbon emissions and the health of buildings. They're doing this both because it matches the mission, but also because we're seeing more state localities pushing in this direction, and we want to see policies that work and really meet the intended goals. Our role at SAFE has been not just to facilitate peer exchange around these collective commitments, but to track data and identify and create resources and advocate for policies that support these shared commitments. So in the last year or two, recognizing that we really are going to need more data in order to make strategic decisions around carbon, we've developed a portfolio carbon calculator that can look at whole multi-state portfolios at once. It draws from data already in the EPA Portfolio Manager to make it easier to get started. That calculator is free on our website. We'd love to see folks check it out and understand better what their portfolio is already emitting. Later this summer, we're going to launch a companion tool that'll take that data from the calculator and put it in a carbon roadmap tool that will help identify strategies to actually reducing emissions. We think these will be valuable tools. We've already seen some of the SAFE members use them to help support or understand commitments they're making to the Department of Energy's Better Climate Challenge. And we think they'll be useful as folks look to explore what IRA resources might be a good fit and good strategies for them. Things like the Greenhouse Gas Fund, HUD's Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, energy rebates, investment tax credits, and so forth.
That's exciting. And when I was looking at your website, I definitely saw the calculator and so forth, and look forward to investigating that a little bit further with some of our other clients and so forth. Switching gears maybe to another priority, and here on our podcast, we've had a theme woven over a number of our podcasts around healthy outcomes, obviously having a good place to live, the impact on healthy outcomes. Would you be able to let us know and our listeners know what you're doing around that area of focus around healthy, thriving residents?
Certainly. I've enjoyed some of those podcasts because they speak to some of the types of partnerships we've been exploring. We've understood for a long time that housing is health, and the COVID-19 pandemic really drove that point home. We can't collectively thrive unless everyone has a healthy, stable place to live. So our work at SAFE begins with the idea that more quality homes and impactful connections to resources will help improve well-being for people and communities. And to unlock those outcomes, we've worked with sort of a three-part strategy over time. The first prong being to go upstream to identify what's needed for a healthy environment and improved outcomes in affordable housing. That's peer exchange and policy work to understand how to connect housing with other social determinants of health. This has also included deepening our own understanding of the role of systemic racism in creating barriers to first accessing that quality home, and then additional barriers that separate it from really the things people need to thrive and improve their health, especially for people of color. The second prong of our approach has been establishing a shared understanding and improved practice around services that are coordinated through housing, or shorthand resident services. And the third prong is developing a common framework for measuring our impact and tracking our outcomes, being accountable for what does pairing that housing with services mean and how are we actually improving health and well-being. Through this three-pronged approach, we've had some success. We've helped create standard practices, we've unlocked partnerships, and we've demonstrated the value of homes with services. In the resident services space, which has been a key strategy for our members for a long time, we've worked a lot on standard practice. Many years ago, we recognized there wasn't a standard for what a consistent organizational-wide approach looked like. Resident services were being done in a very property-by-property way, sometimes with great success, but it was an impediment to scaling what works and honestly creates some risk to the really limited funding sources that are out there if you can't say what quality consistently looks like, and certainly is a further barrier to attracting new resources. So we set out to understand what it takes to consistently do things well. What is the systems approach? And out of that grew our framework and guidelines for resident services coordination. But at the same time, we knew that while we know home is powerful, we needed to be able to demonstrate that in more quantitative ways in order to forge new partnerships and grow support for affordable housing. So our members agreed to a common framework for tracking resident outcomes. So for about 8 years and across about 100,000 households, we've been collecting information on how life is going for residents that benefit from those stable homes with services. We've been able to show greater stability, improved household income, and in some cases, improved access to care, lower ER utilization, where someone has that stable home with services. So this work of services and measuring outcomes, together with that continued exploration of how you can leverage housing as a platform to move other social determinants of health, has unlocked a number of partnerships. That framework, that systems approach for resident services, gave rise to the CORES certification, Certified Organization for Resident Engagement and Services. And that lets owners and operators, third-party providers of high-quality services, demonstrate their capacity and their commitment to providing resident services. And that can be useful as they're communicating to partners in the community, but also funding partners. CORES itself was created to enable a partnership with Fannie Mae, their Healthy Housing Rewards program, which has terms that actually make additional resources available to support services. CORES is also being used by some housing finance agencies as they seek to identify those partners that have a capacity and commitment to high-quality services. Our outcomes framework has also helped us unlock some partnership and spur thinking throughout the field. A great example is our partnership with the United Health Group and our Health and Housing Fund, where we are helping United deploy grant funds together with capital investments, tracking outcomes, and really understanding how that stable home with services can improve outcomes and hopefully unlock longer-term pathways to funding services and improving outcomes. We've recently published a toolkit that brings together these concepts of a framework for resident services with measuring outcomes to help practitioners, funding partners, regulators looking to be more outcomes-driven in their procedures understand how to get started and what they should consider if they want to be particularly resident-centered. As for our future focus, we see an increasing recognition of the power of service coordination to help residents connect to the things they want and need to thrive. So we're focused on a couple of things. We think there are opportunities with healthcare partners to leverage the value of a stable home to improve resident outcomes. So we're looking at a variety of ways to unlock more partnerships around investments in homes and services. Things like what we've done with United, but also other pathways to paying for services and connecting residents with supports for their health. And more broadly, we see this as an opportunity to work with funding partners to encourage them to recognize and fund the value of service delivery. We've seen through the pandemic, it helps support housing stability and in turn, really property performance, as well as drive positive resident outcomes. So we'll keep working on business models and building the case for that support for resident services.
That's quite the framework, and it actually kind of leads into our next question, because over the past 3 years, we've focused on many hurdles to developing affordable housing, especially around balancing the sources and uses out. And we know another area of focus for SAHF is those financing innovations. Would you let us know things you're actually working on within this space?
We're really fortunate to have a great partner in our affiliate, the National Affordable Housing Trust, or NAHT. NAHT syndicates tax credit, housing credit equity investments. And they also provide development consulting services to help build or augment the capacity of affordable housing developers, particularly nonprofit and deeply mission-driven developers. NAHT is a joint venture of SAHF and our partners at the Low Income Investment Fund, LIF, who's a leading CDFI. So that gives us a lot of opportunities to innovate and collaborate. That United Health and Housing Fund I talked about is a partnership together with NAHT. They help deploy the equity. We're helping on the services funding and the tracking of outcomes. This is a first of its kind fund that brings all of that together. This isn't the first time we've worked on a fund like that. We've done so in the past, also with a focus on services through the Strong Families Fund. And we're exploring now where there may be opportunities to support sustainability or just better data collection and transparency around sustainability and carbon in the portfolio. But we also work with other partners on financing solutions, like Fannie Mae with the Healthy Housing Rewards Enhanced Resident Services Program. That's, I think, a success in unlocking a little more funding for resident services, which is something that's pretty tough for these mission-driven actors to pay for. And all of these innovations have really begun with learning. So we're continuing to learn in other spaces. Over the past year or so, we spent some time with our members and our partners at LIF in exploring what works around the co-location of early childhood care and education and affordable homes. It seems like a pretty natural fit, and LIF are leaders in that space. So we've been learning together with our members on that. And this year, we're focusing heavily on lessons learned among our members around creative land strategies, getting your land costs down or thinking of ways of leaving sort of power and control of the land in the community are great ways to both build power and opportunity in communities and also potentially control costs. So we're excited to see where that takes us.
Great. And then speaking of where it takes us, we have one last question before we wrap up. Do you have any advice for our listeners around policy advocacy for housing as we kick off the 118th Congress?
Always. We're in a challenging moment from a cost perspective, supplies, labor, but we're also in a moment of historic support and recognition of the need for healthy, affordable homes. And we don't want to miss that. While it's a challenging federal policy landscape, there are some bipartisan solutions out there. One is the low-income housing tax credit. We'll see a reintroduction soon of the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, and that's an opportunity to expand and improve the credit. We've got great opportunities here to advocate as that bill's reintroduced. You can invite your representatives to tour property, to attend special events, or just visit with them and share stories of how these properties impact lives and communities. It's the greatest thing we can do to help improve supply. But also, there are real opportunities on the local level. There's still some COVID-era funding out there, like the state and local fiscal recovery funds and other flexible pots of money that can be used to help close gaps, create deeper affordability, or innovate in housing. There's also significant money to make those homes more impactful. There are digital inclusion funds out there, and soon we'll see significant funds around sustainability that'll flow through the states. And these decisions about how they're going to be used are being made now, and it's not a foregone conclusion that affordable housing will be included. So it's important now, I think, to be talking with those folks that are thinking in the broadband offices and the local energy offices to educate and advocate around affordable housing and why it's important, for equitable distribution to have that be an eligible use of those funds.
A lot of very good information, Andrea. And that's it for today's episode of the BuzzHouse. A big thanks to Andrea Ponsor for joining the show today. Tell us all about Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future and the important work that they're doing. Once again, I'm Don Bernards.
And I'm Garrick Gibson. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. For additional resources around multifamily housing, check out bakertilly.com. If you have a suggestion for the show, email us at bild@bakertilly.com. That's BUILD @bakertilly.com. See you next time on BuzzHouse.